Want help to grow your business? Download BRiN, the world's first business advisor in your pocket. To find out more, visit BRiN.ai or search the App Store today.
Hi, I'm Pip McKay and welcome to NLP for Business, where we look at the mindset and communication tools for business success and personal well-being. And today's show is all going to be about how to communicate effectively and build your team. So one of the most important things that allows us to build a more effective team is to understand personal differences and particularly different ways people communicate and the way that they learn. And when we understand this, it's so much easier for us to adapt our communication style as a business leader to suit those people in the room. It also allows us to step outside of what our normal learning style and communication style is in order to understand what our preference is and therefore know what we're doing habitually so we can adjust that for other people, particularly those people who think or communicate really differently from ourselves. So what are communication styles? Well, communication styles are based on the dominant sense a person uses to process information and to speak. So it's basically based on the major senses we use in communication. So of course there's smell and there's taste, but we don't tend to use that very much in communication unless we're a chef or unless we are a nose for perhaps perfumes. So normally we're really just looking at three senses and then also the thinking. So first of all, there's visual communication style, and that's people who use predominantly sight. So these are people who need to learn by seeing a picture, but they also communicate using words like, do you see what I mean? Can you picture this? And they really need to be able to see something in order to understand what it is you're saying, or for you to paint a picture with your words so that they're engaged. And then there's kinesthetic. So kinesthetic literally means to move. So that might be to move physically, your body, or to touch something. But it can also mean to be moved as in terms of emotions. So these people might say something like, can you feel what I'm saying? Or they might say, do you grasp that? And they really need to really feel like they can grasp something in order to understand it. Then there's auditory people, so these predominantly use the sense of hearing. These people can remember a lot of auditory information. The other styles tend not to be able to, and they can tend to think in a very sequential, logical order, whereas visual people can see the whole picture all at once rather than a sequence, and kinesthetic people are getting a feeling, so that again is different than a sequence. So often when we're talking a lot, or auditory people are very happy because they can follow exactly what we're saying. But unless we use words to paint a picture or to help people feel something, the other communication styles might not be engaged with us. And then finally, there's audio-digital. So these are people who think in calculations and detail. So these are more conceptual thinkers. And so they often want dates and facts and figures in order to be engaged with you. So these are the four basic communication styles, and it's important we understand our own, but also our team members, and that they understand each other's. So instead of getting frustrated with someone who doesn't speak the same language they do, they're able to really engage with those people and understand the strengths and weaknesses of each. So why are they important? Obviously, speaking someone's language. So imagine if you were going to do a deal in China. Obviously, you're going to get a better response if you speak Chinese. And it's the same with a kinesthetic person. If you speak their language, they're much more likely to have a great response to you. And then there is promoting of understanding for your teams. So this is really where, each team member can understand and communicate in the other person's language. And again, as I was saying before, this really allows you, if you're speaking to a visual person, to make sure you've got a PowerPoint slide or to draw something up on your flip chart paper to make sure that visual people can follow what you're talking about. And then there's better communication, obviously, and also it aids in learning. So if you've got kids, it's really good to know what your kids' learning style and communication style is, because it's going to be so much easier to help them in learning if you understand their style. And finally, it deepens rapport, so it creates better relationships and it deepens trust. So I remember for me, when I first learnt these, I was so excited to learn this because as a child, I was highly dyslexic. So I basically reversed letters and numbers. I didn't find it easy to remember things. In fact, I was actually diagnosed with something called vanishing memory, which means you don't have very much short-term memory. But it was really wonderful when I learned NLP. I found ways myself to overcome that. But when I learned NLP, I understood what I had done in year 9, that it actually increased my results, in some cases by 40%. So I remember before year 9, in year 8, I was getting something like around about 50% for mathematics. And then when I started to understand how my mind worked, I just sort of happened across it because I was staying at a boarding school and we had to have 2 hours of homework per night in the library in silence. And I was a very hyperactive child. Sitting still in silence was not something I was very good at. But because we had to, I wanted to occupy myself. So I took out my homework diary for the first time. I started to get organised for the first time. And I also started to play a lot of games inside my mind to help me remember information because it wasn't very easy for me to remember stuff. So this was really amazing. When I learned NLP, I started to understand what I'd done inside of myself that allowed my marks in maths to go from 50% to 97% at the end of year 9, and for my English marks to go up and a lot of my other marks to go up. In fact, I think if I hadn't have gone to boarding school and sat down and understood this and played these games inside my mind, I don't think I've ever would have gone to university. So this was really, really powerful. And what I started to understand is that I'm a kinesthetic visual learner, which means I need to feel something. So if I was in tune with the teacher and I really liked the teacher and I felt a connection with them, it was easier for me to learn. And also if I could create a picture inside my head, it was easier for me to learn. And if I could create a picture that had an emotion attached to it, then I could remember reams and reams of information really easily. And you can see by these shows, I don't have a script or anything like that. I've obviously been able to adjust my memory so that I can remember things more easily. And so this is very, very powerful because there's things that you can do to help your learning. So I know that a lot of business owners and entrepreneurs were dyslexic, even if they were never diagnosed as that, but they might have had trouble learning in the school environment where there's a lot of auditory information and not a lot of visual or kinesthetic information or learning styles. So this is going to just cut through all of that and just make it so much easier for you to learn and also to help your kids as well. But also your teams, because not everybody in your team is going to learn in the same way. So basically, where do the learning styles come from? What's going on inside the brain? Well, what happens is there's about 2 million bits of information coming into our brain, and then we delete, distort and generalize that. So we cut a lot of it away and we end up with 134 bits. And we chunk those bits in 7 plus or minus 2 chunks. So this information comes from Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi, who wrote the book Flow that you may have read. It's a wonderful book. And so if we average out 7 plus or minus 2s and we put 6 chunks of information here, well, some people take more notice of what they see. So their chunks of information may be caught up with visual information. And then say they're kinesthetic as well, so they might then have a couple of chunks of information that are kinesthetic. So we would call this person a dominantly visual communicator and learner, with also a secondary communication style of kinesthetic. So what this means is when this person says, I can't picture what you're saying, or do you see what I mean, they are literally communicating what's going on in their head. They can't get a picture of what you're talking about, so they can't make sense of it and understand it. Or do you see what I mean? They're asking, do you get a picture in your mind of what it is I am talking about? So this is very, very important for this person, that you start to paint pictures or use those little visual words to help them understand what it is you're talking about. And then this person's also got some kinesthetic, so they're also going to be taking notice of feelings. They're going to want to do things because that's what the kinesthetic learner does. Now, if you said to this person, you didn't use a very nice tone of voice with me, the person would be just like, what? Because they weren't taking any notice of tone of voice when they were talking to you. They were taking notice of how you looked and what it felt like when they were talking to you. So they actually are going to be at a complete loss when you say that. So someone who says that is going to be more of an auditory communicator and learner. So let's just for an instance imagine that we've got our 6 up here, and this time we've got somebody who is dominantly a kinesthetic communicator and learner. So this is feeling and touch, and they're also auditory. So their predominant one is feeling and touch, and their secondary one is auditory information. So this is someone who's going to take notice of feelings, but they're also going to take notice of tone of voice. So imagine this person is married to our other person. And this person comes in and they've just had their hair cut or they've just got new glasses, and they say, "Darling, do you notice anything different?" Well, this person isn't taking any notice of any visual information. So no, they're not going to. So they're going to look at the person and go, no. And maybe the visual person's like, "You don't take any notice of me. You mustn't love me because you just don't notice anything about me." And this person's like, "Oh, but I do love you, but I just don't notice visual information." So if they'd learned NLP, they'd be able to say that. And then this person would be like, "Oh, so you have a different communication style from me. It's got nothing to do with whether you love me or you pay attention to me. It is just that this person doesn't have any more chunks of information left to really notice visual information." So of course they're going to be able to see so they don't bump into things, but they're not really going to be looking at that detail. So if you're someone who's visual and you spend a lot of time with your hair and with your makeup and wearing designer clothes, the kinesthetic person isn't really going to take any notice of that. So you better do it for yourself and not for them, because they're not going to be interested. But this person, they might be saying to the visual person, "How do you feel about me?" And if this person is in their visual mode and not in their kinesthetic mode at all, they're going to be having to think about that for a little while, because that's not the information they're bringing up. So if they were totally insensitive, they'd be like, "I have no idea how I feel about you, but you look fantastic." And of course, that wouldn't be very good for a relationship. But if this person had NLP, then they would be able to say, "Oh, yeah, just give me a moment to get in touch with that feeling. And, I just want you to know that generally I look at visual information, so I'm looking at how people look, and, I can just see the love pouring out of your eyes, and that just makes me feel so good and so loved." And that way we can have much better communication, and people aren't being upset by each other's communication styles, and they're not misunderstanding it. So it's got nothing to do with love or respect. It's just simply to do with people really noticing very different information from each other. So really,
To continue enjoying this presentation, download BRiN, the world's first business advisor in your pocket. To find out more, visit BRiN.ai or search the App Store today.